Roxana saw off the last customer and, exhaling tiredly, sat down in a corner of the large hall. Mornings usually saw fewer visitors in the café, and working with her partner, they had no trouble managing, taking orders, serving, fulfilling additional requests, accepting payments, and even finding time for breaks. The waiters had a favourite spot near the bar for this purpose. It almost hid anyone sitting there, while still allowing them to observe the hall and their customers. Before settling into their secret nesting place, Roxana gratefully cradled her coffee mug, smiling involuntarily. The drink's surface bore a gently quivering foam with a skillfully drawn, funny face, a greeting from Josh, the bartender, who had been not so subtly hinting at his interest in Roxana. Josh's attraction was understandable. Many people were drawn to Roxana. Though not the kind of beauty that turned heads over heels, she possessed a special light and gentle girlish charm that often proved more potent than striking looks. Roxana was petite and slender, with slightly reddish fluffy hair and golden eyebrows and eyelashes that seemed dusted with gold powder. Her brown eyes usually sparkled with cheer and curiosity. Her small, neat, slightly upturned nose, barely speckled in winter, bloomed with golden freckles come spring. These very freckles had been the source of Roxana's despair and worry until the end of school. "What kind of face is this?" she would lament to her mother and her mirror reflection. "It's like a freckled egg." "Oh dear," her mother would chuckle, "you're just being silly. You'll grow up and realize how wonderful it is to have sunshine on your face." "Mummy, I'm a redhead. They're teasing me." "Remember, daughter, you're not a redhead, you're golden-head," her mother replied, hugging the little girl. Roxana's character matched her appearance, cheerful, funny and warming to those around her. Many felt that when Roxana Ripton entered a room, classroom, or the small grocery store near home, everything seemed to brighten. Roxana was loved and welcomed with smiles at home, at school, at the dance studio, at the children's clinic, on the volleyball court, everywhere she appeared. To Roxana herself, it seemed life would always be wonderful and amazing. But everything changed one terrible day, and the smile vanished from Roxana Ripton's face for a long time. When she was 15, Roxana's parents died in a horrific car accident. Her father died instantly, while her mother survived him by only a few hours in the hospital. After the funeral, Roxana's grandmother, blackened with grief, suddenly said, "That's how fate had it. The hospital told me if the ambulance had arrived sooner, they could have saved Irina's life. My daughter wouldn't have lost so much blood, but you see, they're short-staffed, they're overwhelmed, there's no one to work on the ambulance." From that moment on, Roxana knew exactly what she would become when she grew up. She would be a doctor, treating and saving people. Perhaps someday she would save someone else's mother in a similar situation, easing the pain of her own loss. Roxana grew up under her grandmother's care, who had fiercely fought to keep her granddaughter from the guardianship authorities. Children, resilient as they are, quickly adapt to loss and resume a semblance of normal life. So it was with Roxana, who, despite the pitying looks from all sides, and perhaps even despite them, learned to smile again. By 18, Roxana had blossomed into a pretty, agile and vivacious young woman, with no trace of destitution or orphanhood. Despite all difficulties, she entered medical school. Studying proved challenging. Roxana, not naturally gifted with an outstanding memory, toiled over endless medical terms in anatomy, histology, pharmacology, and other sciences until her mind swam. She wrestled with Latin, which stubbornly refused to stick in her head. After completing 2 years at medical school, Roxana felt a sense of relief, Studying became easier. Surprisingly, she found a bit more free time, but money became increasingly scarce. Her grandmother, by then completely worn out, barely made ends meet on her pension. Roxana's scholarships and orphan's allowance barely covered food and utilities. Determined, Roxana started job hunting. Fortune smiled upon her sooner than expected. On her way home from the bus stop, she spotted a large ad on the door of a newly opened cafe restaurant. The pretty redhead made a favourable impression on the manager. The waiter's apron suited her well, and her smile was contagious. Her medical students' trained memory easily tackled the complex, multi-page menu. Salad with shrimp, cold smoked trout, couscous, fresh lettuce with arugula, seasoned with Provençal sauce and flying fish roe, she said to the manager on her first day, impressing him with her quick study of the menu. "That's nothing," Roxana grinned. "Try memorizing Crista supracandularis or Angulus inferior." The girl quickly won the hearts of both staff and patrons. She worked efficiently and carefully, rarely fell ill, and eagerly accepted additional shifts instead of asking for time off. Having earned some money and spruced up her wardrobe, she caught the eye of several potential suitors. Among them, the bartender Josh was notable for his special sensitivity. Learning that coffee with milk foam was Roxana's favourite drink, Josh seized every opportunity to showcase his barista artistry. Intricate petals, flowers and hearts from the enamoured bartender regularly adorned her cup. Josh was a good-looking and kind guy, but Roxana could only consider him as her boyfriend if she would drink 100 cups of coffee in a row. She candidly confessed this to Josh, commiserated with him about their mismatched interests, and proposed a pact of friendship and companionship. To Josh's credit, he took it bravely and didn't cut off Roxana's coffee supply, continuing to provide her favourite drink, now as a friend rather than a potential boyfriend. That's why the heart pierced by arrow designs on the coffee foam were replaced by images of faces, suns and ships. Once, a melancholic, coffee milk skull peered at her from the depths of her fragrant drink. Surprised, Roxana nearly dropped the mug and then laughed heartily. Despite his unrequited love, Josh was an excellent bartender. He brewed magnificent coffee, and Roxana savoured its incomparable aroma. Sipping slowly and squinting blissfully, she habitually surveyed the half-empty hall. Assured that no one required her services yet, she settled in and indulged in her favourite game. "So, who do we have here today?" she mused. At the second table, a middle-aged man. Noticeable dark eyes under his eyes. Not just puffiness, but definite facial swelling. And sunken eyes. Probably kidney or bladder issues. Okay, next. Table 8. A full-bodied lady in her 50s, yellowish skin. That's likely a liver problem. Maybe even hepatitis. She needs a biochemistry test ASAP, and here she is eating fried potatoes. Roxana lingered on the woman with the concerning diagnosis, resisting the urge to approach and share her observations, to warn her of the potential danger. Next, she finally tore her eyes away. Oh, what a contrast! A man with a very red face. Such pronounced hyperemia could be anything from allergies to hypertension. Or maybe he just overate. She grinned, recalling the red-faced customer's 5-course order. His companion, on the other hand, is the opposite. Pale with cracked and sore lips. Definitely anemic. She should borrow a steak from her table-mate and eat properly. The next guy in his 20s is also pale, with unnaturally bright eyes. I think his thyroid needs checking. Roxana routinely made such observations about those around her. She'd learned to spot signs of various diseases in people's appearances, mentally rehearsing diagnoses and treatments. This wasn't mere curiosity or an odd hobby for a young girl. It was the professional interest of a third-year medical student moonlighting as a waitress. Osteoporosis, she silently diagnosed as she watched an older man walking cautiously toward the exit, visibly leaning forward. And arthritis, of course, with severe joint deformity, she concluded. My goodness, everyone seems to have some ailment. Where are the healthy people? Oh, here's a perfectly healthy, beautiful person at last. Roxana's gaze involuntarily settled on a woman in her 30s, sitting near the bar. Indeed, at first glance, she appeared perfectly healthy. Shiny, meticulously styled blonde hair, clear skin, a healthy blush. It was refreshing to see after the parade of less than happy health indicators in other customers. The woman was not only well-groomed, but also naturally beautiful. However, her appearance was marred by an angry and disgruntled expression as she looked at the 5-year-old girl sitting across from her. The child, wrinkling her face capriciously, pushed the plate away while the woman persistently moved it back. The little girl was adorable, with short blonde hair curling loosely and grey eyes that looked both serious and mischievous. Listen, Kate, stop being capricious. Roxana heard the woman's voice. Eat now. We're already running late. The little girl shook her curly head and tried again to shove the heated plate away. Eat it, shouted the lady. These are vegetables, you know. You need them. Besides, you haven't eaten anything since this morning. Do you want to faint? The girl shook her head and nodded at a nearby table. There, in the centre of a large plate, a puffy, ruddy pizza glowed atop as a bright yellow-red spot. The girl was clearly indicating to her mother, if indeed her angry companion was her mother, that she'd much prefer to trade the nasty green broccoli florets for a couple of pizza slices. From Roxana's perspective, this desire was perfectly understandable and logical, especially for a child. Strangely, throughout Roxana's observation, the little girl didn't utter a word, only moving her lips. This unusual behaviour puzzled Roxana. If the child had been mute, she would likely have communicated with her companion using sign language. There had to be another reason. After a few minutes of observation, Roxana could barely contain her laughter. Without speaking a word, the curly-headed little girl had managed to bring the woman to her wits' end. What kind of child is this? What a punishment for me! The woman finally shouted. For the last time, I'm asking you, will you eat? The girl shook her head adamantly and suddenly began to turn blue. The cafe's lighting wasn't bright despite the time of day, and at first Roxana thought it was a trick of the light, or her own eyes playing tricks. The girl's fresh pink face, lively and expressive just moments ago, suddenly became a mask, terrifying in its immobility. Her complexion first drained to a deathly pallor, then quickly shifted to a bluish tint. Roxana leapt up from her chair so hastily that she knocked it over. Ignoring the coffee cup that crashed to the floor, she rushed to the girl. The girl was already on the floor, twitching and writhing with convulsions. Her thin fingers dragged across the floor, her tiny fingernails seemingly trying and failing to claw at its surface. Roxana threw herself on her knees beside the girl. Her companion, standing over the little girl, had eyes bulging in horror and hands clenched. "What's the matter with her?" Roxana shrieked, turning to the woman. I don't know," the woman almost shrieked back. "What do you mean you don't know? Are you her mother? Is she sick?" Roxana jumped to her feet, grabbed the woman by the shoulders and shook her. "What's wrong with your child? She's suffocating." Yes, but I don't know. She has, I don't remember what it's called." The woman grabbed her throat for some reason. "An ambulance! Josh, Erica, someone, call an ambulance right away!" Roxana shouted. "Tell them it's a girl about 5 years old. Sudden asphyxia. Medium severity. It's not clear what caused it. Hurry up!" She pushed the frantic lady away and knelt down again in front of the girl. The little girl was drawing in particles of air with great difficulty, wheezing noisily. "Lord, what is wrong with her?" Roxana thought frantically. She had been watching the girl. She certainly hadn't held anything in her mouth. She couldn't have choked. But she was choking. Her tongue! We must hold her tongue, lest it fall into her throat, flashed suddenly into Roxana's mind. "I'm a future doctor, you stuffed-up fool," Roxana grumbled to herself, gently unclenching the girl's convulsively clenched jaws. "There, little one, that's it. It's all right. You hold on, baby, the ambulance is coming. They're real doctors, not like some of us here. We're just in training. There's nothing in your throat, is there? Why are you choking?" Roxana desperately ran her hand over the little girl's forehead, wiping away the cold sweat that had appeared on her blue skin. Suddenly, she saw a strange protrusion on the girl's neck, covered by the fabric of a turtleneck. Roxana carefully pulled the collar down and saw a thin plastic tube sticking out of the girl's throat. "Does she have a tracheostomy?" she shouted in astonishment. "Oh, I don't know exactly. Our granny who deals with all this horror, she knows everything. And I was on a business trip," the woman blurted out, swallowing her tears. "Kate, it's like, well, when there's a scar in the throat and so... So it turns out your daughter has a tracheostomy tube, right? That's why she wasn't talking. But then she can't be suffocating because that's what the tube is for, to avoid breathing problems." With trembling hands, Roxana touched the plastic tube on which the little girl's life now depended. The girl was clearly struggling for her last gulps of air. "God, where is the ambulance?" Roxana thought in panic. "I don't know what to do. This is unlikely to help, and I shouldn't if she has laryngeal stenosis. Or should I? I don't remember if we learned that. Or did we? But she's going to die. Screw it. If there's something blocking her breathing, we've got to get that damn tube out. Don't touch anything. You're not authorized to give such serious help." A voice suddenly came inside her head. "You're just a student. It doesn't matter that you're a med student. If the girl dies, you could be accused of causing her death. Do you realize that? Stand aside and wait for the ambulance with everyone else." Roxana looked around the hall at the frightened, crowded visitors, waiters, and some people from the street, then moved her eyes back to the girl's face. The little girl was breathing heavily and intermittently, obviously tired and giving up the fight for her life. Roxana stubbornly shook her head, and holding the body of the plastic tube with one hand, pulled out the inner part of the device. She knew only the approximate structure of the so-called tracheostomy tube, which is inserted into the larynx so that the patient could breathe independently. But even her modest knowledge was enough to immediately see and understand the cause of the problem that had almost cost the girl her life. The entire inner tube was clogged and blocked with something, naturally obstructing her breathing. "When did you last flush it?" muttered Roxana, holding the girl's head. "Erica, where are you? Come here, don't be afraid. It's all right. Here, take this. It needs to be rinsed quickly in running water. Don't break it." The girl's head lay in Roxana's palms. The baby was still breathing unevenly, but without labour, no longer wrestling from fate every molecule of oxygen. Air noisily went in and out of the tube, sticking out of the little neck. "Well, are you scared?" Roxana asked, winking at the girl, who nodded slightly. "Well, don't be afraid. It's all over now. Well, let's put it back. You know, the inner tube, called a cannula. It's a very funny word, isn't it? You see how well Auntie Erica cleaned it for you? Well done, Auntie Erica. A real doctor will come and examine you. You'll see. Everything will be fine. And then, if the doctor says it's okay, Mummy will buy you a pizza. Well, Maybe not right away, but later. But she will. Do you know how good our pizza is? I ate 6 slices myself yesterday. You don't believe me? It's true, it's true. Thus, chattering quietly but cheerfully, full of gibberish, Roxana achieved her goal. The deadly horror left the girl's eyes. Her convulsively contracted fingers straightened, and her legs relaxed and stretched. In another minute, the little girl lifted her hand and clung to Roxana's wrist, as if she saw her salvation in her. A few minutes later, an ambulance paramedic entered the hall with a quick step. Roxana tried to get up from her knees, but the girl continued to hold her hand, surprisingly tightly for her age, build and recent condition. There's the girl. Turns out she has a tracheostomy. Apparently, scarring stenosis of the trachea. I guess, I don't know. She actually started choking all of a sudden, but she was cyanotic and tachypenic and stuff. Anyway, I pulled out the cannula and it was clogged up, so we flushed it out and put it back. That's it. The paramedic, quickly examining the girl, occasionally cast angry glances at Roxana, and by the end of the examination, she felt like a criminal, a disgrace to medicine, and generally unworthy to occupy a place on the earth. Finally, the little girl was put on a stretcher and carried away. The paramedic turned to Roxana. What year? He suddenly asked. What? Roxana replied, confused by the question. What year at medical school are you in? The paramedic asked patiently. 3rd, Roxana squeaked. Well done. You saved the girl. He shook Roxana's hand. You didn't do anything extraordinary, of course, but the main thing is that you didn't panic. Thanks to you, the child is alive. Keep up your studies, and come to us after you get your diploma. He grinned ruefully and left the hall. An excited hum lingered in the large café for a long time, though the ambulance had long since departed with the little girl and her beautiful but neglecting mother. Before their leaving, Roxana noticed that the woman, once assured her daughter was no longer in danger, immediately began fixing her makeup. Oh my goodness, Roxana, you're wonderful, simply incredible. Erica, Roxana's fellow waitress, rushed up to her friend with delight in her eyes. And that blonde bimbo, the girl's mother, she didn't even thank you. How rude. To think that you saved her child, practically brought her back from the dead, and she didn't even acknowledge you. She's so ungrateful. And by the way, she didn't even pay for the order. Wait, wasn't that your table? So now you'll have to cover the shortage. That's completely unfair. Come on, Erica. What are you on about? Do you think she cared about the bill? Her child almost died. And you're worried about some bill either? I'll pay, it's fine. Roxana sighed, remembering that the woman's order for herself and Kate wasn't small and included more than one serving of broccoli, which the little girl had stubbornly refused to eat. But Roxana, you're a hero. How did you know about that tube? Erica continued, shaking Roxana's hand excitedly. What do you mean? No, I just saw it, that's all. And please, Erica, stop it. I didn't do anything special. In fact, the girl's parents probably do this at home every day. Just remove and clean the inner tube of the tracheostomy. If they'd done that, none of this would have happened. Let's go ask Josh for some fresh coffee while the hall is empty. I spilled mine and I need to calm down after all this. The cafe's routine, disrupted by the incident with the little girl, gradually returned to normal. The staff discussed the event a bit more, shaking their heads in amazement and concluding, Roxana's such a good girl. She didn't get confused or panic like the others. She saved that child. And that so-called mother of the girl, what kind of idiots have children these days? The next day, everything was back to normal, and no one mentioned the incident. The shift was almost over when a new visitor entered the hall. Roxana looked at him and involuntarily sighed. Such men existed. She thought they could only be seen on the pages of glossy magazines, advertising astronomically expensive suits. The kind of men who sit confidently in convertibles or stand on the decks of private yachts in pictures. In short, the man's appearance seemed unreal, too striking and handsome. Roxana wasn't the only one who noticed the unusual visitor. A hush fell over the hall, quickly replaced by hurried conversations, as if those present were trying to convince themselves and their companions that nothing extraordinary had happened. Just another person coming to the cafe for a meal. What's the big deal? But they couldn't help stealing glances at him, especially the women. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, and well-built. His thick blonde hair was carefully styled, and Roxana, looking at his hairstyle, unconsciously reached up to smooth her own perpetually unruly curls. His cheeks and chin were clean-shaven. Clearly, he wasn't interested in the stubble trend, though admittedly it would have suited him well. A small pair of thin-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, slightly diminishing the Superman effect. But even with the glasses, his face was strikingly attractive, handsome in a genuinely masculine way. This splendid figure was dressed in an entirely mind-boggling classic suit, dark, almost black, with the finest light pinstripes, a snow-white shirt, and a steel-grey tie that seemed to match his eyes. Shiny shoes completed the picture. Roxana sighed admiringly once more, and tried to remember where she had been heading before his miraculous appearance. Suddenly she realized with astonishment that the amazing visitor was staring at her, and now he was striding purposefully in her direction. "Hello," he said, looking at her over his glasses. His eyes were grey, framed by dark lashes, slightly downcast and very attentive, and for some reason they seemed tired. "Hello," Roxana replied confusedly, involuntarily catching the faint, tangy scent of his cologne. "I'm looking for the waitress who assisted a little girl in this cafe yesterday," he stated, continuing to stare at her intently and sternly. "Obviously that's you. Why is it obvious?" Roxana felt suddenly afraid. What if something happened to that little girl after all? Maybe I've only done her harm with my stupid help, and this dapper, handsome man has come to tell me so. Roxana thought sadly, then shook her head stubbornly. What am I thinking? The girl would have suffocated. I did what I had to do, regardless of what anyone thinks. Roxana looked boldly, almost defiantly, into the man's eyes. Well, yes, it was me. And I did what I could. Though I'm not a doctor, not yet, but you know, I don't think you can just stand by and watch a person die before your eyes. A child especially. Roxana's voice rose almost to a shout. And suddenly, something changed in his face, as if a filter had been removed. Instead of the stern, cold, handsome man from an advertising brochure, before her stood just a very handsome man with a confused expression. No, you misunderstand me, he exclaimed, folding his hands pleadingly in front of him. I came here to thank you. I'm ready to thank you on my knees and kiss your hands if you'll let me. I am, you see, the father of that girl. You saved my Kate yesterday. The astonished Roxana stared at Handsome. He, visibly agitated, took out a handkerchief from the pocket of his impeccable suit and wiped his forehead. Then, taking a few deep breaths, he adjusted his glasses and, in a fraction of a second, transformed into a stern, poised, fully self-possessed man. Even his slightly flushed face instantly regained its former matte pallor. His self-control was evidently well honed. Is there somewhere we could sit down and talk? He asked. Well, actually I'm at work, and we're strictly forbidden to sit at visitors' tables, Roxana said uncertainly. I could easily lose my job, couldn't I? I'm sure I can solve that problem, he nodded. I just need a few minutes of your time." Roxana, as if mesmerized, followed the determinedly striding man, feeling like an occasional visitor, while he seemed the owner. Indeed, as soon as he overcame his sudden excitement, he exuded confidence. It was obvious that he was accustomed to giving orders, being the master of any situation, and subordinating others to his will. They sat down at the table opposite each other, and his voice sounded firm and confident, as if in a business negotiation. "So, Roxana," he glanced at the name tag pinned to her apron, "yesterday you saved my daughter Kate. I am eternally grateful to you for that. I won't waste your time expressing my feelings, it's not necessary. I'd just like to know how I can thank you for what you've done." "Look, I didn't do anything special," Roxana replied. "I just cleared the clogged cannula in your Kate's tracheostomy tube. You can't really thank me that much. I was just in the right place at the right time, and did what I could." "Exactly. You were in the right place at the right time, for mine and Kate's good fortune." He nodded gravely, his gaze warming. "I spoke to the paramedic who took Kate from here. He confirmed that if you hadn't done what you call nothing special, I'd probably be sitting in the morgue with my baby right now. Thank God you cleared that damn tube." "Actually, parents of a child with a tracheostomy should do this daily themselves and keep an eye on the breathing apparatus." Roxana couldn't resist a sideways jab at Handsome. "It's very serious. Instead of thanking me, you'd better explain to your wife, if she hasn't realized it yet, that if your child has health issues, you should at least know what they are and how to help in case of emergency." He listened attentively to Roxana's reprimand, his face twitching painfully, as if all his teeth were aching at once, and he smiled shyly, guiltily. "Yes, of course you're right." The man nodded again. "It's just that Alina, my wife, is, how shall I put it, not the best mother in the world. We haven't actually lived together for a long time. And Kate and her illness—" He barely got the word out, swallowing hard. "Kate is mostly cared for by my mum, her grandmother. Alina sometimes takes the girl to be with her, to play at being a mother, so to speak. And you see, she almost played to—" Roxana listened with amazement to the confession of the man sitting before her. His words were filled with bitterness and despair, so at odds with his confident, polished appearance. It was strange that he was being so frank with a waitress who was a stranger. Apparently he suddenly realized this himself, and once again the stiff, closed-off stately man sat before Roxana, seeming to exude coldness. "I'm sorry. Well, it's not interesting at all. Tell me, how can I ever thank you? I'm sure you could use the money." The blood rushed to Roxana's head. "What? Are you out of your mind? You want me to take payment for helping a little girl? Are you used to paying for everything? Measuring everything by money?" She jumped up from the table and waved her hand indignantly. "Roxana! Roxana!" He jumped up next, and as if suddenly resolved, took her by the arm and resolutely, but very gently, sat her back down. "Please forgive me. For God's sake. I'm probably just used to communicating with, well, a different sort of people, so I'm talking nonsense. It's a kind of professional deformation. You know, I mostly deal with people who measure everything by money, time, services, relationships, even guilt or innocence. I'm a lawyer, you see." "Well, of course, you're a lawyer." Roxana leaned back in her chair to get another good look at him. He couldn't be anything else. The man fit the image of an unapproachable, ruthless lawyer perfectly, exactly as they are portrayed in movies and books. Roxana clearly imagined him standing before the judge in his magnificent suit, glasses gleaming, demolishing all the accusations against his client, including the perfectly fair ones. And judging by the man's appearance and demeanour, he was very successful as a lawyer, his services apparently worth a small fortune. Surely he earns more in a day than I will in a month, with my most necessary and marvellous profession, thought the girl with bitter irony. Well, I won't take up any more of your time then, he said, glancing at his watch. Of course he regrets wasting his time, that's for sure, Roxana thought involuntarily. He's probably in a hurry to get some thief out of a deserved punishment, isn't he? The man looked at her and grinned slightly, as if he had read her mind. I'd still like to leave you something as a token of my appreciation, Roxana. Well, I don't know, but at least take my card. Maybe I'll be useful to you some day. I can help you in some way. God forbid, of course. People don't come to me at the best moments of their lives, quite the opposite. But still, here, take this. He handed Roxana a small business card. She took it in her hands. On the dark blue background, in embossed black letters, was printed, Tyler Stewart, Lawyer Services, and a phone number. Just call and say, he smiled, Tyler, I need your help, and I'll be at your service right away. He got up from the table and adjusted his already impeccable suit. Good day to you, Roxana. Thank you again for everything. He bowed his head, ceremonious, somehow inexpressibly elegant, and then turned and strode resolutely toward the exit. Tell me, Roxana suddenly called after him, why did you approach me so confidently? How do you know what I look like? He stopped and turned to face Roxana, smiling. His face became kind and open, as it seemed to do whenever he remembered or talked about his daughter. Kate described you to me in great detail. She said that you look like a princess from her favourite cartoon. She also said that you shine and that you're warm. That's exactly what she said, word for word. She glows and she's warm. I didn't understand it at all, of course. I thought it was just a childish fantasy. But now I see you. That's right. It's true. I see it and I feel it. That's probably why I'm so frank with you. I'm surprised myself. Goodbye, Roxana. Be happy. And the cafe door closed behind him. Well, who was that? The father of yesterday's girl? Oh, great. And what? Erica pounced on Roxana, having long been pining with curiosity on the sidelines. What did he want? To give you money? You refused, of course. You're a fool. I would take them. He wouldn't become poor. From the looks of it, this guy is loaded. You should have seen his car. Who is he? A lawyer. What's his name? Let me see that. Wow, he must be one of the big shots. Well, did you at least charge him for the precious lady's lunch yesterday? No? Well, Roxana, you're just a bit of a dope. You're so rich, you're buying lunch at your own expense for the wealthy lawyer's family. Cool. Roxana barely fought off Erica's questions and admonitions. She turned the business card of the lawyer in her hands and shoved it into a pocket, among other seemingly unnecessary, but for some reason kept and transferred from bag to bag small things. Day after day, life went on as usual. For some time, Roxana remembered the handsome lawyer with the sad look, with a poorly concealed trepidation. Somehow, it seemed to her that despite all his outward confidence and polish, imperious notes in his voice and obvious wealth, he was, in fact, a lonely and unhappy man. Why she suddenly decided so, Roxana could not explain even to herself. What a fool you are! Found someone to pity, she sneered at herself. Poor unhappy lawyer millionaire. Married a princess and she turned out to be a toad. You'd better think of yourself, instead of his bitter fate. You've got no warm boots, no jacket, and winter is coming in a month, by the way, and you still haven't paid your rent. And it's time for Grandma to buy medicine. For sure, all the medicines have run out, and she won't tell me. Roxana hardly noticed how she progressed to the last year of her studies. Exams, residency placement, and many other important and epochal things inexorably approached. Her head was cracking from studying, and then her grandmother gave her an unpleasant surprise. She had fallen unluckily and injured her femur, and what such an injury meant for a 70-year-old person, Roxana, a soon-to-be doctor, didn't need to be told. She floundered like a madwoman between the house with a bedridden patient, the medical school, and work in a restaurant, which, despite everything, she didn't quit due to chronic lack of money. However, now she had to take mostly shifts that ended late at night, and chronic sleep deprivation was added to Roxana's usual problems. Roxana's last spring as a student was beginning. It was already quite warm during the day, and the sun's rays were furiously melting the dirty city snow. By evening, winter was returning, and everything that had melted during the day was again covered with ice. On one of these evenings, Roxana was walking home from the bus stop, stubbornly running through a difficult hematology problem in her head that would surely be on the exam. The task wasn't working. Her feet were slipping on the icy asphalt, and the heavy bag loaded with groceries was dragging at her shoulder. Besides, it got dark quickly, and for some reason the street lights were slow to turn on, leaving the girl to walk almost in darkness. Finally, Roxana reached the place where she had to cross the road, and according to the old habit ingrained by her grandmother since childhood, stopped on the curb. A few meters from the crossing, with shrieking brakes, a car slowed down, obviously letting Roxana pass. She adjusted the strap of her bag, which was digging into her shoulder, and stepped onto the roadway, glistening with frozen water. A few seconds later, she heard a thud and then a nasty metallic scrape. The car standing in front of the crossing suddenly began to move for some reason and quickly slid straight at Roxana. The girl shrieked, rushed forward, barely managing to dive out from under the bumper in a split second, and jumped to the side of the road. Gasping from the effort, she threw her bag on the ground and looked around, confused. At the crosswalk, blocking it, stood a small, dark car, the same one that a few seconds ago had seemed to have stopped to let Roxana cross the road. And behind it, jammed into the trunk of the front car and practically crushing it, was a huge, dark Jeep. "Damn it!" resounded in the evening silence, and a man was getting out of the Jeep with obvious difficulty. Wounded or something? Roxana thought, alarmed to see the Jeep driver frantically grabbing the top of the car door, struggling to get out. After a few seconds, the reason for his difficulty became clear. The driver was incredibly obese. Third-degree abdominal obesity, probably risk of diabetes mellitus, stroke or heart attack. Roxana mentally diagnosed, her medical training kicking in automatically. The hefty man, cursing continuously, finally extricated himself from the car and resolutely approached the driver of the front vehicle, who was staring dejectedly at his broken headlight. "Are you out of your mind? Why the hell are you braking in the middle of an empty street? Are you a complete idiot?" The obese man had clearly decided to assert his dominance, but his opponent wasn't easily cowed. "You're the idiot, look at you! You rear-ended me, and now you're yelling at me? You've ruined everything! Look at it! The bumper, the truck, the headlights, it's all wrecked!" "Oh yeah? I couldn't care less about your lights. You better look at this!" The large man lumbered back to his car with surprising agility. "Here, look! My front headlight is worth more than your entire car." "Well, I don't give a damn about that," the other driver retorted. "It's not my fault you don't keep a safe distance. You're driving like a fool, and on ice, no less. You're to blame for the accident." "What do you mean, me? What are you talking about? No, you explain to me. Why did you stop in the middle of a street at night like a lunatic? Did you fall asleep?" The obese man fumed. "Actually, there's a crosswalk, and a girl was using it. What did you expect me to do, run her over?" His opponent snapped back. "A girl? Are you hallucinating?" The large man marvelled. "There she is." The driver of the first car looked around, spotted Roxana huddled on the curb, and pointed at her. "Young lady, come here. Please explain to this gentleman that you were crossing the road. He doesn't believe it." "Yes, of course I was crossing," Roxana nodded obediently. "I'm sorry about how things turned out. I looked first and you were—" She smiled at the man. "You let me pass. I saw you. That's why I went." "Oh, so that's who's to blame." The obese man turned his entire body, for he had no discernible neck, and fixed Roxana with a heavy brown stare. "What are you doing here at this hour?" he suddenly shouted. "First of all, don't you dare point at me," Roxana bristled, "and lower your voice. Secondly, I was crossing the road at the proper place, and I made sure I was allowed to pass." "Oh, really? The proper place? And who put it there for you?" the man asked mockingly. "Well, you know," Roxana said indignantly. "Of course you can't see the road crossing markings now because of the ice and snow, but the sign is right there." She pointed at the blue and white sign. The obese man, breathing heavily, glared at the sign with hatred, then turned the same expression back to Roxana. "All right, enough of this pointless chatter," the first driver suddenly interjected, dialing a number on his phone. "We're calling the traffic police. We'll file reports and go home. Then you can do what you want. Accuse anyone and anything. And you, young lady, don't leave. You're involved in this accident too." "What? Traffic police?" The obese man became agitated. "Are you crazy? We're reasonable people. We'll sort this out right now. We'll draw up the report ourselves without the cops. Agreed?" After the protocol was drawn up and signed, Roxana glanced anxiously at her watch and picked up her bag. The whole incident, the accident, conversations and paperwork, had taken nearly an hour. God, Grandma must be worried, Roxana thought with anxiety. Wait, where are you going? What about compensation?" the obese man suddenly blurted out. "Oh, what do you mean, compensation?" Roxana asked, genuinely surprised. "Don't worry, I don't need any compensation. Nothing happened to me. I'm alive and well. Sure, I was a bit scared," she smiled, "but it's nothing. I'll go home now, have some chamomile tea and calm down." "Tea? You don't need anything." "Are you kidding me?" The obese man marvelled, looking as if he might have a stroke. "Or are you just simple-minded, girl? Who's going to pay for my damages? Well, that jerk who braked for no reason. His insurance company will cover everything. What about me? Do I have to pay out of my own pocket?" "I don't understand," Roxana said, taken aback. "Do you want me to pay for your repairs?" "Well, finally, you've caught on," the man smirked. "That's precisely what I want, dearie, and you're going to do it." "You're out of your mind. Why should I pay for your repairs when you were responsible for the accident? According to the report, you caused the accident. You signed it yourself." "You can shove that report where the sun doesn't shine. Do you think that being a pedestrian means you can't be held responsible? Well, that's where you're wrong, babe. I'll prove it's all your fault. I ran into that clown because of you, so you might end up paying not just me but both of us. Think it over, and agree to make amends before it's too late." No, you won't get away with that." Roxana continued to resist, though less confidently. "I was crossing the road at a crosswalk. There's a sign." "It's there now, but tomorrow who knows?" The obese man dropped a cryptic phrase. Roxana was suddenly afraid. Just minutes ago, she hadn't been sure she wasn't involved in what had happened. Well, she was involved, of course, but only as a witness who had almost been run over. Now everything had turned upside down. She was being blamed for the accident, and demands for compensation were being made. "How can that be?" she thought. "I almost got hit by a car and suddenly I'm guilty of causing an accident? No, it can't be. That nasty fat man is just trying to intimidate me, taking me for a frightened girl. But what if he isn't? What if I really am guilty of something?" "Listen," said the man, "I'm not going to waste time talking. If we don't settle this amicably, I'll sue you in court. You know?" He suddenly lowered his voice. "I wouldn't advise you to rely too much on our humane court." The man chuckled. "I'll have witnesses testify that you ran across the road wherever you pleased. That man who left? He'll confirm everything as I need. You can bet on it. So go home and think about where to get the money. I won't charge you much, don't worry. No more than 10,000s. 10,000s? Roxana uttered, the figure incongruous to her ears. "Well, what did you expect? The bumper and hood need replacing, both headlights need replacing, and the fenders need painting. I'm charging you a fair price, almost at cost." The man chuckled disgustedly and, getting into the car, threw one last comment at Roxana. "Be aware I have your address in the report. Don't think of hiding. I have good connections. I'll find you and punish you anyway if you don't want to do this nicely. I'll call you in a few days and we'll agree on details. Go, and don't try anything. Bye, girl." The door of the SUV slammed, and in a few minutes Roxana was left in complete silence and darkness. She didn't remember how she got home or what she said to her grandmother, who had been alarmed by her late arrival. She hurriedly gave the elderly woman some explanation and went to her room. Everything that had happened seemed like a nightmare. She began to believe passionately a couple of times that it was a dream, that she would wake up, put all this strange nonsense aside, and forget about it as stupid dreams are forgotten. But it wasn't a dream. "No, it can't be. This is absurd." She sprang to her feet. "I should just go to the police, tell them everything. Report that I'm being extorted for something I didn't do. It's not my fault. He was just scaring me. No, I'm not going to the police. Why would I? I don't have time for that. I have exams to study for. To hell with that crazy guy. It's all forgotten." But it was much easier said than done. The next day, on a break between classes, Roxana suddenly saw an unfamiliar call on her phone. "Well, darling, have you thought it over? When are we going to settle everything up?" A nasty chuckle sounded in the receiver, which made Roxana go cold inside. "How did you get my number?" she asked. "Oh, sweetie, I know everything about you, and about your grandmother. She's home alone now, isn't she? It would be a misfortune if something happened to the old lady, wouldn't it? Well, don't be scared. It's just in case you have any stupid thoughts in your head, like going to the police." Roxana suddenly felt chills down her spine. Her hands and feet were cold, and her head suddenly felt very heavy. "Listen, leave me alone," she said, trying to keep her voice from shaking and giving away her condition. "I won't pay you anything. It's not my fault. I crossed the road where I was supposed to, and it's easy to prove. You must realize that yourself." "Well, well," the voice's man snickered. "Look, you've got a life to live. And about the proof? Oh, don't be so sure, dearie. Today they're there, tomorrow they're not." Roxana tried to put it all out of her mind and concentrate regarding the lesson, but it was frankly difficult. After classes at the medical school, she took her usual route home from the bus stop and suddenly stopped in her tracks. At the place where yesterday there had been a crosswalk sign, there was now a cut metal pipe sticking out. Roxana was again gripped by the icy horror that had become habitual for her over the last 24 hours. "Who is he that acts so brazenly?" she thought. "Probably it really costs him nothing to produce a crowd of witnesses who will easily show that I pushed both cars together with my own hands." She couldn't tell how long she sat curled up in fear on her old, faithful sofa. Suddenly she jumped up and rushed to the wardrobe. In a minute She was frantically rummaging through her clothes, searching for an old, long-abandoned purse. Fortunately, she found it deep beneath old clothes, and in one of the pockets lay a business card, made of a thick navy blue cardboard with embossed black letters. "Hello, may I speak to Mr. Stewart?" she said into the receiver, her voice hushed. "I'm listening," came through the receiver. "Mr. Stewart, I need your help. It's nothing special," she whispered into the receiver. "Roxana, is that you? Finally remembered about me?" His voice, so calm and even before, suddenly sounded excited. "I recognize you. Roxana, I hear you. Where are you? Tell me the address. I'll come at once." A couple of hours later, Tyler sat in Roxana's small kitchen, listening to her story. They hadn't seen each other for almost 2 years, not long enough for people to change much, but something had clearly happened to him. Only after Roxana finished her story did she realize. Back at the cafe where they met, despite his outward brilliance and confidence, he had seemed somehow tired and confused. She had dismissed these thoughts as nonsense then, but now, with him so close, sitting in her kitchen in a simple sweater and jeans, with barely noticeable stubble on his cheeks, squinting myopically as he listened attentively, this feeling resurfaced, stronger and more explicit. "How are things with you?" Roxana asked suddenly, surprising even herself. Tyler was taken aback. "What, me? Oh, you know, same as usual. Everything seems normal." "And how is Kate doing?" Roxana asked, changing the subject entirely. Tyler's face instantly brightened. "Kate is well. Oh, she's doing great. We got rid of those damned tubes long ago, thank God. She's quite healthy now. Talks a lot. She's a clever girl. She's practicing tennis and even going to learn singing." He proudly listed his daughter's accomplishments. "Oh, and most importantly, she started school." "Really?" Roxana exclaimed. Tyler nodded. "Yes, I finally divorced. Kate lives with me now. And you know, Roxana, she remembers you often. You might not believe it, but she regularly asks if I remember the girl who makes people feel light and warm." Suddenly, Tyler took Roxana's hand in his and pressed it to his lips. Roxana froze, afraid to move and break the subtle, fragile tenderness that had arisen between them. "So," Tyler said abruptly, as if waking from a dream, "let's solve your problem first. I understand everything now. You just fell into their hands. It's a classic extortion scheme. These guys are likely working together. There might not have been an accident at all, you know? It could be all a setup. In any case, Roxana, don't worry about it anymore. It's my concern now." "Tyler," Roxana said, using his name without the patronymic for the first time. "Not at all," Tyler laughed. In court, Tyler Stewart dismantled the charges against Roxana. He even secured an additional investigation, which led to the entire gang of extortionists, including the leader, being put on trial. The day after the trial, Roxana appeared at Tyler's office. "Tyler, we need to talk seriously. Thank you for helping me. Now, I have to pay for your services. I didn't even ask how much it is. Apparently you're quite famous in your circles, and your services are costly." "Roxana," Tyler said with quiet reproach, "a couple of years ago, my only daughter faced a terrible misfortune. She almost died. A strange, red-haired waitress saved her. That girl told me she didn't charge for helping little girls. You know, I've remembered that all my life. And I no longer charge for helping little girls either." He suddenly took Roxana's hand and pressed it against his cheek. "Roxana, shall we celebrate the victory of truth and justice over deceit? I'm inviting you to a restaurant. I couldn't sleep all night thinking about how I lived without you these past 2 years. I think... No, I'm certain. Roxana, I love you. Roxana suddenly realized she didn't want this man to leave her life. She would give anything for those grey, slightly squinted eyes to always look at her as they did now, affectionately and enthusiastically. Roxana smiled back. Her life was finally on a white streak.